start this hour with education. South Africa's attempts to accommodate safe schooling in a time of COVID-19 has been thwarted by poor infrastructure and a lack of funds. Now, most recently, teachers' unions have been saying that the staff shortages at schools are reaching a point of crisis. Teachers with co-morbidities who are vulnerable, of course, were granted concessions to work from home. To discuss, we're joined by Senior Research Associate at the University of Johannesburg, Mary Metcalfe. Mary, thank you for being with us. Do we have any idea how many teachers right now are being paid but are not able to return to work?
We do have figures, Francis. In research for the Pepe Ofunde campaign, Be Safe and Learn, it became very apparent that this is a crisis across many schools. And the DG for the Department of Basic Education presented figures in Parliament this week. And what was clear from his figures are several things. Firstly, there's only about 5% of teachers in the country who have applied for leave for comorbidity, which is less than expected in terms of the figures prepared by Professor Shabir Mahdi at WITS in terms of what we would expect for comorbidities. And that was based on a sample of all teachers in the country with quite a high level of participation. So we have fewer teachers applying for leave than expected, which means that those applications are still in the pipeline, and probably the teachers may not be attending school. But what's more worrying is that of the number of concessions granted, it's only while the teachers that are allowed to be away because they've been given a concession numbers about 20,000. They've only been able to provide 6,000 replacements. So teachers are applying and it isn't yet in the system. Secondly, teachers are being granted concessions and no replacements are yet made available. This makes dealing with COVID for school leaders even more difficult because you have to manage the complicated physical distancing arrangements, the new procedures for keeping ourselves safe and others with not enough teachers.
Okay, so this is a big problem. 20,000, you say, have been granted that concession, but the figure could be much higher because of the delayed applications. Why is it taking so long? If this is a health issue, the teachers can't go to school and wait there and expose themselves for months in the first place, surely.
Well, firstly, teachers and principals, I'm sure, are acknowledging that they must, first of all, protect the safety of teachers, which means that they probably are not reporting at school, which means that schools are coping with fewer teachers, and that has to be a challenge.
Yeah. But do we know why it's taking so long to process those applications?
You know, COVID came completely unexpected to the whole country and to the education system. It brings new routines, it brings new challenges, it brings new procedures. So already strained education department officials at district and within the administration are having to cope with complex reporting, having to cope with managing procurement of PPEs, managing their distribution, managing their processing of these leave forms. So it is urgent. The DBE reported very transparently to Parliament, and all we can do is to support everybody who's making the efforts to try and resolve the problem.
Yeah. And if there's a gap, say at a minimum of 14,000 or so, you pointed that out, what sort of pressure does that put on the system? Do you try and push current teachers to just fill the gaps? The department says there is no money for those replacement teachers. So what gives now?
Francis, it's a good point that the cost of replacing all of these teachers is considerable. And the DBE has already been told by Parliament that they're not going to be receiving additional money for all of the expenditure that has been required in terms of infrastructure and personal protective equipment. What it means is that the burden is carried at school level. and the complexities of a school. It isn't just a simple ratio between number of teachers and number of learners. You may very well find that there's the foundation phase. I would be interested in understanding if they are more affected because they tend to have older teachers, and older teachers have are at higher risk. So that means that the principal and the school management team with the school governing body have to make arrangements that all children are taught with an unpredictable number of teachers, with an unpredictable set of teaching skills and subjects and phase specialities. So we all need to be supporting school leaders at this time because they are complex management issues.
And unions, if they decided to take action or protest over this, demonstrate, would you support that? Is this a situation where government needs to find the money, in your opinion?
My understanding is that the unions are doing everything in their power to find ways to solve all of the problems in the schools, despite the frustrations of teachers on the ground, which are very real. I think leadership at this time requires that we understand that these challenges were unanticipated, could not be planned for. We've all got to put our shoulder to the wheel and help find solutions. It's not a time for blaming, it's a time for saying, what can we do to solve this problem?
Let's talk about that, because COVID-19 finally has exposed many problems in education that gets the lion's share of the budget every year. So looking at what has been exposed, where should South Africa be focused if we start to fix things for the future?
We have to deal with the inequalities in terms of infrastructure. I think all South Africans should have been appalled at the number of schools that are functioning under normal times without adequate water. And this was then apparent because they could not manage the required cleansing arrangements that are needed for COVID. We have to address the infrastructural backlogs, the sanitation backlogs. What we also see is huge differences between the capabilities of different provinces to be able to respond to challenges of distribution. And those inequalities have very much to do with the complexities of working in rural areas and the backlogs of structural inequality. So we have to deal with inequality. The second thing is the question of access to resources when learners are learning from home. The reality, as long as COVID is in the world, is that learners are going to be attending school 50% of the time because classes have to be smaller, more learners are learning at home. Learning at home means for some learners that they're able to access Wi-Fi, they're able to use a personal device, they've got reliable Wi-Fi, they don't have to worry about data. But for the majority, they are dependent on the limited resources that they get from school that are from paper. That is why I think we also need to be glad that the DBE, with the support of the NECT, has launched Woza Matrix, which means that at least the grade 12 class is going to be receiving a dedicated period of time on the national broadcaster and the other broadcasters where they will be helped to prepare for the exams intensively. So there's inequalities, there's real backlogs in infrastructure, there's inequalities in terms of how learners are able to learn at home. These are present all of the time, but COVID has highlighted it for us. And if we want all of our learners to have the fair chance in education, we need to accelerate our efforts to address these problems.
Yeah, so many challenges, and this is the future of children in this country. Thank you so much for your time. That was Senior Research Associate at the University of Johannesburg, Mary Metcalfe. Now, another news